Alrighty, hello there, Doomloopers, and welcome to another episode of the Doomloop Dispatch, the show all about the worst parts of the San Francisco Bay Area. Today, Scott and I have an awesome guest, the Deputy Director of the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy, Isaiah Toney. He's a longtime activist in the Bay Area, and we really appreciate him being here because we get to talk about the people's budget as the battle for Oakland continues, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going to happen with this next budget cycle. We definitely have a leftist side that we need to listen to, especially because they're fighting for the people. So first off, I just want to get into it though, if you don't mind. How are you feeling about this budget battle right now, Isaiah, with the FBI raid, post FBI raid on Mayor Sheng Tao?
Yeah, at the end of the day, like procedurally, the mayor's kind of completed her work on this budget cycle. When she released her budget proposal back in May, that was kind of the big piece that the mayor is responsible for. So, where there's tie votes at city council, because we have 8 city council members, they will bring in the mayor to break tie votes. Right. But other than that, we're looking forward to the budget getting passed tomorrow at the 1:30 p.m. city council meeting.
Great. So you don't think it'll be scuttled in any way? There's a big push to stop it.
To stop the approval of the budget?
Yeah, or at least there's a lot of criticism from the Tim Gardners of the world and the Chris Moores and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that's going to have any kind of effect on? Do you think they'll try to interrupt the process or disrupt it in any way?
I don't know. I have a hard time seeing it. It's. I mean, my real take on it is I don't see what they would get out of it. We're seeing the mayor's budget proposal had a $14 million increase in the police department. My understanding is that that's kind of the main budget issue that the mayor's critics are at least claiming to hold dear. And when so many other departments are facing cuts and so many city positions are frozen or cut, it just seems odd that would be something they hope to actually achieve.
Right. So there is a proposal to actually cut police staffing, right? Or is there an increase in police staffing? I mean, I'm kind of confused about which one, because it would make sense for the recall people, because they're such pro-cop, to be trying to figure out a way to keep the cuts from happening. But you're saying that they're actually once again going to get more funding. Is that what's about to happen?
So the police department is going to get more funding. The plan is for the number of police officers, sworn police officers, to go down due to the state of some level of fiscal emergency. And my understanding is that allows them to continue collecting a particular tax that's only collectible if the city maintains a certain number of sworn officers, except when there's fiscal emergencies. And last year when we were looking at the budget, I believe it was about a $360 million gap over 2 years that was projected. And the budget gap that they're trying to cover this year is $155 million after having covered the 360.
Right.
So, earlier this year, we had thought that if the city wasn't going to find something miraculous, that there would be major cuts across pretty much every department, including police. And, we've been very happy to see that lots of the departments that we work closely with are not getting cuts, and some are proposed to have some staffing increases.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and actually that's a good place to start with the EBASE's take on the budget. why did EBASE propose the people's budget, and what are some of the, for our audience, what are some of the big asks in it?
Yeah, so EBASE is part of the Oakland People's Budget Coalition, which has been around since 2015 as Oakland's kind of main community and labor coalition that brings a progressive agenda to our city budget. So that's been a range of things like fighting for grants for the Department of Violence Prevention, fighting for resources for tenants who are facing eviction. Sometimes their tenants facing illegal eviction, right? And if folks don't have access to a lawyer that they can pay out of their own pockets, sometimes fighting homelessness means the city helps folks out and helps folks defend themselves against an illegal eviction. Our platform, every cycle is kind of generated by the member organizations of the coalition. So we often see, protecting city jobs, the folks that come out and clean the street and move the abandoned autos and trim the grass at the park and staff the park. We see things about filling potholes. It's a pretty broad range of city services that our folks are pushing for. And the vast majority of them are really kind of quality of life issues for residents here in Oakland. Our folks are very interested in seeing the expansion of violence prevention work, which happens, both through Department of Violence Prevention grants to organizations that, run the Town Nights program. Sometimes that's the ceasefire program and interventions when we expect that there may be retaliation after violent incidents. Right. So we've got our kind of priorities organized into a few different categories. Housing and ending homelessness is one of those categories. Having good jobs and a vibrant economy is one of those categories. Arts and culture has been something we all think of Oakland as doing really well at, because we have, brilliant artistic and cultural leaders here in Oakland that are doing great work. But our city's ability to support those folks has dwindled in recent years. And as we've seen, budget cuts, especially in the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, arts and culture support has been slow to come back. And then, community safety has been one of the big issues that our folks have worked on. And, we would love to see some of the resources that we think are spent pretty ineffectively in the police department be spent more effectively elsewhere. And there's a pretty broad range of places to do that.
Right.
Yeah, and it's great. I saw too that you a part of the people's budget is pushing for instead of police officers, more of your kind of community officers, like people just, you don't need to have a gun and talk about quit resisting. You could solve problems in safer, nicer ways.
I find it really interesting because the narrative that we keep hearing. I mean, just this ridiculous narrative that Oakland defunded the police at some point. It seems that the exact opposite is always true. Like it seems that Oakland is constantly, same thing's happening in San Francisco. It seems that the cities themselves continue to fund the police, continue to increase their budget, even if they have to cut their staff. How do you think that narrative persists? Because you're somebody who's actually on the ground there, and you see how this budget is being, sometimes like the budget itself happens, and then somehow the narrative gets manipulated to where instead of more money being given to the cops, and they're saying that the cops have been defunded. From an insider's perspective, as somebody who actually understands how this budget works, is there any way you can explain to me how that continues to happen?
The explanation requires us to consider some pretty strange stuff. Like how come people are allowed to repeat this narrative that police have been defunded in Oakland and mainstream journalists don't know how to check on that? Like don't know how to go on the city's website and use the tools that are designed for the public to go and look at a table that very clearly identifies how police authorized budgets have been going up, and the expenditures, which is not always the same as the budget they're approved to spend, goes up because their overtime is completely out of control, and the unbudgeted overtime keeps running tens of millions of dollars every year.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. I remember going on a ride along with an Oakland police officer in 2006. And he was talking about how officers, especially during the summer, will increase their workloads to 100 hours a week just to get that overtime. And they say, oh, well, we're understaffed, but then when you ride along with an Oakland police officer, it's really them just speeding to one call to another and not even making it a lot of the times,
Yeah. And it's, some of it has to do with like, what's the plan that the police department has for how they propose to ensure safety, right? And, if the approach is, let's get as much money into the police department as we can so we can have as many police officers as we can, so we can have as many police officers in as many neighborhoods as we can, then of course they're going to schedule lots and lots of shifts.
Yep.
And part of what we've seen is that they'll make a plan and say this number of shifts needs to be filled, knowing that they don't have the staffing to appropriately fill those shifts. So what happens is an officer leaves their regularly scheduled shift to fill someone else's shift that wasn't filled, and you get paid time and a half when you fill somebody else's shift. Now the shift you just left that you were going to be paid regular time for, someone else is going to take and get paid time and a half for.
Oh.
Right. So there's a whole like network of issues that the city really has to tackle in a group, because some of the police staffing issues are in the Police Officers Association contract. And city council can't just vote in the budget to override that contract, or they'll get sued. So the city really has to like have the political will to go into negotiations with the Police Officers Association and know that they're going to negotiate some of those terms back that are favorable for police, because it's not favorable for everybody else.
Right.
Man, that's so evil. It's a total shell game.
It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a scheme. The police are a pyramid scheme. I'll be damned.
Yeah. Surprise.
Yeah.
But and that's not surprising at all, especially to have the state also be involved. I'm guessing it's the state that requires a certain amount of police officers as well. So there's, it's the same thing with the housing crisis. Like, let's create a housing crisis by having the state pass a bill that every city needs to build this many, same thing with the cops. It's just, state should not be involved with local municipalities like that.
Yeah, it's tricky, but our sworn officer floor is a Oakland law. It's from 2014. It measures the I believe it's called the Police Services and Public Safety Measure. And I think that's supposed to go up for reauthorization this November. I'm not sure if it's qualified, but it was for 10 years. So if the revenue stream is going to be maintained, it needs to be approved by the voters.
Was that under Quan then?
Yes, that would have been November 2014 would have been the re-election for mayor that she did not win.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And also I'd like to point out, after the Occupy protests and the Meserly protests, so it makes you think too. We got to make sure we got enough cops to protect this property over here.
Yeah. I'm not trying to pivot or anything, but I'm really curious about the sale of the Coliseum and how that's going to affect the plans for the budget this year. I mean, I'm pretty confident. I mean, I have faith that I'm hearing things from Kaplan. I'm hearing things from Dow. I'm hearing things that are saying that like there's a very high likelihood that this sale is going to go through. But what are the consequences if it doesn't, and what are the benefits if it does?
So the benefits, if it does, I'll start with because it's simpler. The benefits is that we avoid the massive cuts that that we thought we were facing earlier this year. The current plan is for $63 million to be paid during the upcoming fiscal year. And then the remaining 42-ish million would get paid in subsequent fiscal years. So the 63 million would be available for fiscal year 24-25. That helps avoid layoffs in the fire department, in Department of Public Works and Transportation. We work very closely with the Department of Workplace and Employment Standards, which investigates wage theft and other labor violation claims here in the city of Oakland. We're very happy to see that the mayor's proposal does not include cutting the investigators, who are very overworked. So the Coliseum sale helps prevent layoffs and program cuts. If the city does not sell or does not complete the Coliseum sale on time in order to be able to plan to spend the 63 million when they authorize this budget, then they will have to authorize a version with $63 million less. So there is a version of that up on the city's website that is sort of formally noticed for tomorrow. My understanding is that that's like the last ditch, cover yourself and all eventualities, unimaginable possibility kind of option. So we expect that the city will complete the Coliseum sale and approve the version of the budget that spends that money.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. It's so funny too, the criticism about that, especially using the sale to cover the budget gap, which I don't know, makes sense to me. If you want to keep things going, might as well get the city money to do it. But there's such criticism on the right over it, especially as I mentioned before, Tim Gardner, who's this Oakland resident turned activist just this past year, funny enough, when these recalls. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Totally. Didn't care for 15 years. And suddenly he's involved and an expert on everything Oakland. But he was commenting too about, oh, well, we could be using this sale to fund a beginner entrepreneur fund, and it's just, no, let's use it for the city and to cover things. And especially when it seems like the biggest criticism is the salaries of city workers. Now, I've seen the Chronicle said their salaries have gone up as much as 37%, which does sound like a lot. But then also too, if you want the best employees working for the city, you want to pay them appropriately.
Yeah, now, at least, especially when the private sector is actually asked, if you have somebody who has the talents to go into the private sector, you're going to have to be at least halfway competitive, and then you still have to ask the person to have a heart and think about taking care of the community. So that makes sense to me.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, but is this narrative real? Are those city workers overpaid or overcompensated?
Not at all. I mean, I think part of the reality is that city workers took a big hit in the 2008 financial crisis. And part of how the city balanced the budget was city workers took a 10% pay cut and said, we want to keep our jobs. We want the city to not go bankrupt. We're willing to make this sacrifice. And they haven't caught back up to that yet. So it's been 12 or more years since the kind of, the budget's been closer to where it was before. And those workers are still trying to get back up to, the their salary being worth what it was in 2008.
Right.
So part of what that means is that the city, sees folks leave for a similar job in another jurisdiction, making more money.
Yeah.
Part of what that also means is that if someone gets a job offer from the city of Oakland and the city of Berkeley to do the same job, one of them pays more, and it's almost certainly Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a harder time retaining people. We have a harder time hiring people. That means we have less people on staff than we would have planned to. So that means the people who are on the staff have to take on extra work. So now people are underpaid and overworked, right? And people know that, right? And it's contributing to part of the problem of services not getting delivered, right? It's contributing to the problem of residents feeling like, we authorized the budget with X number of positions in, cleaning up the graffiti, but I can go and find a report that says we didn't clean up much graffiti. How come the city can't hire people to clean up graffiti with the tax money that I paid?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually see delivery of services kind of stabilizing the city's workforce, and helping make sure that the city's money goes where the city's budget says it's supposed to go. All of those are going to be improved by raising city worker salaries. One of my best friends that I went to Skyline High School with here in Oakland, got a double master's in public policy and public administration at USC, went to work for the city of Larkspur. He had interned at Corte Madera, and then he went to the planning department at Berkeley. And someone from the city of Oakland tried to recruit him. And he was considering taking a step up in responsibility and a step down in pay, and said, I just can't do it. I want to have a great career and I want to be in a position of leadership. And this makes it look like I'm not a great worker. This makes it look like, I'm not invested in my career.
He's essentially demoting himself. In order to serve Oakland, he would have to demote himself. That's just terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible. Yes. These people are worth what they're paid.
Yeah.
That's insane. Well, and it's so funny too, because you bring up Berkeley. Now, Berkeley is going through their budget process right now, and they have their budget gap is over $100 billion, and they're arguing that now. That's not getting the same coverage as what Oakland's getting. That's not getting the, I want to say, at least 4 or 5 articles in the Chronicle a week. The San Francisco Chronicle is so focused on the Oakland budget for some reason. Oh, maybe because it's a way to attack the mayor. How common are these budget gaps? It seems like everyone has them, and doing something like using a sale of property to cover it is an MO. It's how you operate.
It's actually a fiscally sound position to take. That's the thing that mystifies me. And because, like I said, you have the inside track. I'm curious about the pushback that the people's budget gets. Do you get? Is it more like, say, private citizens, or do you get any pushback from inside the city hall itself? Who are your biggest resistors to the people's budget?
So, I think a lot of what is on the People's Budget platform, because it comes from the communities that our organizations work with, it tends to be things that council members don't want to be seen as opposing, right?
Wow.
So, when we have something up there like defund the police, move X many millions of dollars into something else, then we get some clearer, I don't agree with that. A lot of the pushback we get ends up being, well, I want to fund the thing you want to fund, but I don't know where else I'm supposed to cut. Can you tell me what I should cut so I can pay for your thing? Which is a not really above board way to interact with folks in the community who are relying on our legislators to kind of follow our direction and figure out what the path forward to meeting communities' demands are. But we do a series of kind of advocacy visits with council members. Usually we do a lot more for the 2-year budget that happens in the odd years, because the city goes through a lot more public engagement and process.
Yeah. Oh man. And now kind of coming back to the Coliseum, is there any concern? I mean, because there's been, I mean, and I hate to cuss, but there's been so much rat fucking and all this politics around. Especially, it's hard not to see the Tau FBI raid as something very political and sinister, at least from my viewpoint, because it sounds like the dongs were straw donating to lots of people, but suddenly it's only an issue if it's somehow connected to Tau. But that being said, so we're having all this, I mean, evil, like wartime politics. Could they scuttle the Coliseum deal to really kind of put a wrench in the budget stuff?
Well, yesterday, City Council completed the second vote on the purchase and sale agreement, which instructs the city administrator to negotiate with the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. There's a couple of terms that are identified in the purchase and sale agreement, and then there's some terms to be negotiated by the city administrator. But at this point, preventing the Coliseum sale from going through would mean intervening in the negotiations between the city administrator and the developer. So showing up at a city council meeting isn't going to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that actually is good news.
Yes. Finally, a win.
A win. Man, it's so funny because it really is about, like, you know, trying to stop these outside influences from allowing the city to function the city's supposed to function.
Right.
So I mean, like, so, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, because, like, I'm curious to know, okay, because we know that there's real estate developers who have a great deal of interest in current Oakland politics.
Yeah.
And one of my primary concerns is, like, how they influence the way that Oakland spends its money. Where Oakland, and this whole thing you were talking about, like how Oakland helps with eviction moratoriums or helps with like, you know, the illegal evictions, you know. And that can actually do some damage to, like, really shady real estate developers and really shady real estate agents and really shady landlords who just so happen to be running these recalls. So I mean, like, so as a representative of the people's budget, and do you feel any of that coming your way? Like, you know, as you're trying to negotiate just to have the city function in a way that's actually more progressive and more people positive and people focused, are you bumping into these outside forces that are trying to divert you or distract you or anything like that?
You know, I think one thing I've been really happy with the coalition on is that we have enough discipline to not engage directly with the folks that are just hell-bent on kind of, you know, interrupting the city's ability to be a city and to do its work.
Yeah.
You know, we did a press conference a few weeks back at the city council's first budget hearing, and there were a group of pro recall folks that came out and you know, tried to, like, get in the background of our press conference, and that we had to, you know, encourage away from us. And, you know, I think part of what's tricky is that so much of the influence that real estate and big business wields is in private. And, you know, we don't actually have transparency to know who's lobbying council members, right, or the mayor. And, you know, I think that there's, you know, like the Chamber of Commerce in Oakland, which presents itself as sort of being the business community, which, you know, would reasonably lead one to think that, oh, that's mostly small businesses, right? Like most of the businesses are small.
Right.
But the Chamber of Commerce is run by the big businesses that pay for its operations. So that's why you see, the Chamber of Commerce leaders opposing things like Measure Z from 2018, which was a hotel worker labor standards and minimum wage, and a department to oversee labor standards. And like they opposed raising the minimum wage in 2014, so that folks could make $12.25 with paid sick days. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in kind of peeling back, who are the people behind the spending in elections. Every election in Oakland, there's some new committee that spends, several $100,000 or $500,000. And unless you know how to like sit down and spend an hour or two digging through, the state FPPC website and the Oakland Financial Disclosure website, like there's no way you would know. And here's another example: Measure HH, the sugary beverage tax, in 2016, was a half penny per pound of added sugar tax for sweetened beverages. And the beverage lobby put out mailers saying this is a grocery tax. Your groceries are going to be taxed.
I remember that.
And they sent those mailers into the neighborhoods that are most impacted by the overconsumption of sugar, right? Because poor people don't want to see the cost of groceries going up. And we actually did see a court order preventing the continued description of the sugary beverage tax as a grocery tax. But those kinds of kind of deceptive tactics from people with a whole lot of money don't always break the law, right? Sometimes they just mislead in a legal way. And we have a lot of work to do to kind of understand who those folks are and what the money is that's moving. Because I think voters and residents want to know that, and want to know that, the folks who are claiming that the path to safety is through policing are also the folks that raised your rent and didn't give you that raise and were totally fine with the coal poisoning your air.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Well, so you've been doing this for a while. I mean, well over 15 years, right? Are you almost at 20 now? And
I got my start in organizing when I was in high school at Skyline because I was unhappy with the school lunch.
That's awesome. Well, so that being said, the climate now, especially the kind of battleground, is it more intense than it used to be? Because that's how it feels, especially how it's being covered and what's coming on in the social media, especially because I think a lot of campaign finances go into social media trolls, and they don't have to really claim that, but that's a whole other thing. But still, social media narrative, it seems like it's a real war. What are you seeing, and is it gotten worse from over the years?
I think that there's like a rigorous level of debate that sometimes includes people raising their voices that has stayed constant. I think there's also been an increase in the sort of like personalizing of attacks, especially against women of color in elected leadership positions in Oakland. We've seen Councilmember Carol Fife, Council President Nikki Fortunato Bass, and Mayor Shang Tao all be targeted by really disgusting messages, both directly to them and about them to other people. The recall Shang Tao crew is running around doing their press conferences with a poster board of a mock-up of her in an orange jumpsuit, like it's a mugshot with like bars behind her. And it's just baffling that this is like acceptable, and that these people are considered like reliable sources and get quoted in the newspaper.
Right.
And it's I know that individual journalists aren't necessarily in complete control of the editorial stance, and the number of journalists available to do interviews and chase down stories and do the research is down. But at some point, folks cross over into just perpetuating lies in a way that has to be accountable.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things I'm curious about, because like you said, a lot of these things that they're doing aren't necessarily illegal. Like it's not, it's unethical, right? It's unethical. It's I think personally like offensive to my sensibilities, and also offensive to the way that I think the political process works.
Right.
But I mean, like from your experience, and it sounds like it's extensive, how do we hold these people accountable, especially coming from the situation like, where we're talking about the money? We're not talking about anything else. Let's push the personality things to the side, because we also understand that's also about the money. Mm-hmm. Like the tax you're doing on Qingdao, and the tax you're doing on Carol Fife, and the tax you're doing on Nikki Fortuna-Vass, ultimately it comes down to the money, right? So how do we hold these people accountable? I mean, what would be some of your strategies? And I'm talking about as a representative of the people's budget, but also somebody who's involved very closely with Oakland Council and the City Hall. I mean, what are some of the tactics and methods you would recommend if you were given like a magic wand to try to hold these people accountable?
Great question.
Ooh, well, I would swish my magic wand many times, but there's one thing that's not so fantastical, which is democracy dollars. So in 2020, Oakland voters passed a ballot measure that would put in place a new public financing system for our elections, where every registered voter would get 4 $25 vouchers that they can contribute to candidates. And the intent behind this is to sort of level the playing field. Right now, we're typically taught, right, in school that democracy means one person, one vote. But when money is allowed to influence elections, it's not just the votes that count. So we see massive expenditures, from business interests that have to be countered by people power on the other side. Right. So democracy dollars is an attempt to say, okay, we've done the analysis. We know that the vast majority of candidate contributions in Oakland come from folks in the hills and in districts 4 and 1. So what can we do to kind of, level the playing field and give folks in the flatlands and in Deep East Oakland a chance? Mm-hmm. So democracy dollars is being implemented slowly by the city. One of the things we're looking for tomorrow is the city to invest an additional $100,000 for a half-time staffer in the Public Ethics Commission to help continue the implementation. When the program launches, it's going to be new. There needs to be a set of educational materials. Yeah. Somebody on the staff needs to write those educational materials and run them by the folks that have worked on this to make sure that they're accurate and educational. So democracy dollars is like ready to come into play in 2026, and we're looking forward to that. I think separate from that, folks that are the working people got to have our organization. We don't have enough money to counter the business lobby's money. We got to organize people power. So, lots of organizations within the Oakland People's Budget Coalition have C4 partner organizations that are legally allowed to do more work on elections. We work closely with Oakland Rising, which is a collaborative of organizations in Oakland that, helped run the Democracy Dollars campaign to build power on other issues. Sometimes that's things like the progressive business tax, which we passed in Oakland in 2022. So for the first time ever, the giant corporations like PG&E aren't paying the same tax rate as, the mom and pop store on the corner. And we need more activity and more recruitment and more organizations into our people's electoral organizations.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, sound solutions, I think. Yeah. I mean, and as far as but what can the everyday average citizen of Oakland, California, what can they do right now in order to join the people's budget, to join these organizations? Can you tell me of a couple of resources or organizations that people can just get in contact with today, the minute they hear what you said?
Yeah, so folks are definitely encouraged to reach out to EBASE, the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy. Our website is workingeastbay.org. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And then, we've got, I think, almost 20 organizations in the coalition. Some of them are unions that represent city workers. Some of them are tenant unions. Some of them are advocacy organizations. And we've got something for everyone here in the coalition. So I think if folks are interested, we would love to talk. And after this budget gets passed, we're going to be looking at next cycle's budget, which they'll actually start talking about earlier than ever this time, closer to the end of this year as opposed to in the spring next year.
Oh, wow. Interesting. And I wonder, will the recall, you think affect that at all with Mayor Tao?
The timing of the budget cycle?
Or at least like the next budget cycle, and working out and making sure there's some things that, prioritize the people and not just business.
Yeah, I think the recall is going to be pretty influential on the next budget cycle. The mayor proposes the budget.
Yes.
The other thing to look at, though, is that we've got a lot of city council seats that are up, and the city council approves the budget. So, District 1, Dan Kalb's not running. District 3 is up. District 5 is up. District 7 is up, and at large.
Wow.
So there's 5 city council seats. And, Nikki Fortunato Bass, who's in District 2, is running for supervisor in November.
Yep.
So if she wins that race, there will be a vacancy. So theoretically, there could be 6 new council members voting on the budget next year. In all likelihood, it won't be all 6. But, that's part of the kind of calculus that we're looking at.
Oh my gosh. Well, so if you care about Oakland, get involved now, especially these campaigns. We got to make sure. And will you guys be endorsing any candidates?
Yeah, so our partner organization, East Bay Action, has endorsed Zach Unger for City Council District 1. He's the head of the Firefighters Union here in Oakland, is a big supporter of Macro, and we're really excited to see him as an ally on City Council. In District 3, we've endorsed Councilmember Carol Fife for her reelect. Very excited to continue working with her. In Districts 5 and 7 and at large, we have not completed endorsements, but the filing deadline is a little more than a month away. So folks should tune back in August and September to hear about final endorsements and the plan for November.
Awesome. Wonderful. Yes. So this has been a great talk, Isaiah. Thank you so much. I tried to read up on this, and I'm so glad we have an expert like you to tap into. So thank you so much. And I do, before we wrap up, though, I do want to know, because, again, we're the Doomloop Dispatch. We're always talking about the negative aspects. What's keeping you positive? What's keeping you fighting and keeping you motivated?
My kid turned 5 last week, and I've been drawing deep inspiration and encouragement from seeing my kid hanging out with other kids. Kalila was about 9 months when the pandemic hit, and like a lot of kids, didn't get a lot of the park time and play dates. But seeing them as 5-year-olds be happy with each other and, excited about the world and the future is really kind of the example that I'm looking towards these days.
Right
Love
on.
it.
Likewise.
Yeah. That's such a great age too when they're 5. So
Yeah.
super cuddly.
That's right.
When they turn to teenagers, not as much. Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, and keep fighting the good fight. I really appreciate it.
And we'll check in with you again after this budget passes, and we have to start thinking about these candidates.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Well,
thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks,
man. Have a good one.
Have a good
All
one.
right. Take care.